Well, I'm going to continue on in the kind of video series of how God's existence practically affects us. We kind of looked at more of the emotional aspect this time, and we're going to kind of look at how the emotional aspect ties in with our actions. What should we do about it? So that's what this video is about, is how God's existence should drive us to action. So if you're somebody who doesn't acknowledge the God of the Bible's existence, or doesn't have a right relationship with the God of the Bible, then there's two things that immediately stick out. We looked at God's power and His control. If you don't acknowledge the God of the Bible's existence, or if your relationship between you two is not good, it's adversarial, then the stark reality is that God's power will be against you. That's just the sad reality. If the God of the Bible does indeed exist, which, as I've stated, I personally think He does exist, and I think there's very, very good reasons to think that He does exist. But if that is true, then God's power will at some point be against you if you don't acknowledge Him, if you don't have that relationship with Him, that child relationship. God will judge you, and His power will be directed towards you because you have not submitted yourself to His authority as Creator. You have rebelled against Him. You have broken His laws, His commands. You have committed injustice. You have done that which is wrong, and so God's power will be against you. Now, we all have rebelled against God. We all have broken God's laws. We've all broken God's commands. We've all done things. We've all done wrong. We've all done injustice in our lives. And so, since we've all rebelled against God's authority, that would mean, logically, that we should all experience God's power against us. However, God has made a way to be in right standing with Him. And I will very, very shortly make a video about that, about how you can have right standing with God, and my story about how I got in the right standing with God. So we're all rebellious. We've all rebelled against God. We've all broken that relationship between Him and us. We all have experienced that. So I am not better than you. I am not in any way, shape, or form some kind of saintly individual, if you will. I'm not some kind of very, very pious individual. I am a sinner who's God's extended grace and mercy. And God is gracious and merciful. God really is truly gracious and merciful. A God that's long-suffering, who abounds in goodness. And if you're somebody, maybe you're an atheist, that if God does exist and you're an atheist, and maybe you say very vitriolic things towards God, maybe you mock the idea of God's existence. If you're somebody like that, think about it. This is absolute proof that God is merciful. The fact that He allows good things into your lives, that He doesn't strike you down dead, when you say those things. Rather, He still, fills your life with good things. I'm sure within the past week you've had a good meal, you've laughed, you're watching this video, so you're able to have, money enough to have technology, and such things like that. You're able to enjoy the things of life. And so that shows right there that God is merciful, that He is merciful, that He is love. So that's what I would say to those that are not, how it practically affects those that are not in right standing with God, those that do not acknowledge Him, do not acknowledge His existence. But what about those who do acknowledge God's existence, who are in a right standing with Him, who do have some sort of relationship, some sort of friendly relationship with the God of the Bible? then God's power is for you. His power is on your side. Maybe you're going through some really, really difficult circumstances currently, or just facing a really, really tough time. Then know this, that God's power is on your side, that He is there for you. It's that verse in Romans that says, all things work together for good to those that love God and that are called according to His purpose. His power is for you. His power is on your side. And that should continue to seek His strength and His power in prayer. Oftentimes we have not, the Bible says we have not because we ask not. And so oftentimes I think we don't see God's power in our lives working on our behalf like we should, is because we don't ask for it. So we should seek God's power and His strength in our lives through prayer. And the last thing is we must submit ourselves to His authority. We must seek and strive to just completely submit ourselves to His authority. Say, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. To seek to live for God's will, to do what He asks us to do His commands, to follow wherever He leads us, and just to lay our lives down and let God have our lives, let God have control of our lives, and not ourselves. And this is an issue that all of us struggle with, I think, on a daily basis. I know I myself struggle with this concept of laying my life down, laying my will down to God's will, and saying, Lord, you have your will, and I will follow wherever you lead. That's I think a challenge for all of us, but it's something we need to strive to do daily. And so I think that concludes probably Genesis, all these video series on Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. I think the next one we'll delve into verse 2 and get into the ramifications of that and get into topics that deal with that verse. Thanks for watching.